Hello and welcome to the IDC and ATARC's Advancing AI in the Federal Government Virtual Summit. For those who do not know me, my name is Kirsten Patton and I'm the Working Group Program Manager here at ATARC. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We are a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site innovation, learning, and market research. Thank you to the IDC, specifically Rick Ulo, for helping us to create this event. And additionally, I would like to thank you all for joining us today. Today will be a day full of action-packed panels and presentations, all surrounding advancing AI within the federal government. Listen today as topic experts go through their strategies that the agencies have implemented in order to create a more cohesive artificial intelligence and data infrastructure throughout this past year. Listen in as they describe the challenges and successes that they've encountered along the way, and hear panelists answer questions about what emerging technologies are being used to propel AI in the federal environment moving forward. We hope that you enjoy this summit, and I would also like to remind you that after each presentation, there will be a Q&A, so please place all your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I would also like to remind you to answer the poll questions throughout the day to ensure that you receive your CPE credits for being here. Up first, I would like to introduce our visionary keynote speaker of the day, Gil Alterovitz. Gil is the Director of Artificial Intelligence within the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Gil, we really look forward to hearing from you.
Great, thanks, Kirsten, for the introduction, and we'll share slides and get started here. All right, so welcome to everyone here. Really excited to be here and talk about advancing AI. Going to talk a little bit about giving the federal perspective on that here. I think we're really, if you think about it, we're really at a unique point in history, literally. There's only going to be one time in history where we have this graph here and this intersection here where we see that human performance gradually increases over time, and computer performance and artificial intelligence is right now for the most part inferior to human performance on a number of different aspects, but has in recent years and very recently surpassed human performance in a number of aspects. So in the past, it would have been unthinkable to think about computers being able to understand what is in different images, to be able to classify different items in images. And now we're seeing human level performance on images, and in some cases even better than human performance on images. So you can actually take a look and see after, maybe it's an image that is just has a little area of a particular animal or something, and you can later, find out which animal it was. And sometimes the humans cannot tell what it was, and the computer can. And so as we kind of are in this place where there's that intersection between human and computer performance, that's going to essentially happen once in history, and once computer performance really kind of goes above that, you'll see that it's kind of an exponential growth. So we'll see a lot of changes happening really rapidly. And so that's what makes a number of the areas here when we're thinking about advancing AI really important, because now is that critical time. And one of the areas is to really align the AI to your mission when you're thinking about advancing AI, right? That's kind of the first step. So we'll talk about designing and how you can work on creating AI use cases so that you can advance AI within your area. And then the approach that we'll talk about is this idea of trustworthy artificial intelligence. And to do all of this, you really need to build capacity to advance AI. And that's really the next step that we have here. So how do you build that capacity? Well, it involves the people, it involves the relevant approaches of AI that you want to use. It involves potentially partnerships with industry. So building all of that and thinking about that is really important as we think about implementing trustworthy AI across the mission space. And then finally, of course, it's really important to have kind of a loop where you have an iteration of implementing and testing AI. So that may involve creating and using AI checklists, piloting, and then once you do a few iterations to actually scale. And that's one of the ways that AI really takes its next step is when you actually are able to scale and leverage a lot more data and information, because data is really kind of the core fundamental to all of the AI models, having a lot of data that it can actually look at all the different cases and analyze that information to give the best potential suggestions. So I want to go with an example here, and I see a number of new, faces on, or a number of new people in the participant list this year. For those of you who were in a version of this talk a couple of years ago, may have seen this, but I think it's actually even more relevant today as we start thinking about trustworthy AI, and you'll see why in a little bit. So for those on the call, I'd like to give you, maybe like a minute or so to just kind of take a look, read the sentence, and count how many of the letter F's you actually see in this sentence. Give people maybe 30 seconds to a minute or so. If you kind of count the number that you see there, and once you have that, if there is a a Q&A part or a chat option to kind of just put your number in there, and we'll take a look. If not, we will kind of, yep, there we go. We will move forward. Yep, so we had someone put in 4, for example. Okay, give another 15 seconds or so. Okay. All right, so if you have a number, feel free to put it into, I guess it's the Q&A box, and then I'll be able to see it there. Okay, so it should be a lot easier to see now when we actually highlight the number. And when I was looking at the answers that people were giving, it was kind of pretty evenly distributed. Some people were saying 4, some people I see say 6. So something as simple as counting the number of letters in just one sentence, and it doesn't seem like a very complicated task, but how well essentially do we trust ourselves, right? And so if we see here, we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? But a lot of people put in 4. When I've done this in the past, I get everything from 3, 4, 5, 6. Every once in a while we get 7 or some other number as well. But what you see here is really that trustworthy AI and, well, trustworthy, the idea of trustworthiness sometimes can be essentially subjective, even when it seems very objective. And so it really is a matter of bringing together a number of people to get a consensus. And when we do that, we do see that, a number of, it's, for example, in this particular question, if someone says 4, someone sees 6, through a conversation, it can evolve that, that 6 is the answer. And if someone said 7, people start realizing that it can't be 7. And through discussion, we really evolve and discover what is kind of either a ground truth or some principle that we would like to use for trustworthy AI. So just wanted to kind of point that out as kind of a first case there, and that it is an area that kind of evolves. Now, AI itself is something that is a rather hot area right now in federal government. There have been 2 executive orders, Office of Management and Budget guidance from the Executive Office of the President, as well as a national AI bill. And these have been aiming toward maintaining leadership in AI, national leadership in AI, promoting trustworthy AI, including 9 principles. and OMB guidance for regulations of AI applications, like for example in industry. And the National AI Act was actually embedded in the National Defense Authorization Act this year, and it was enacted as a way to bridge a number of the different AI thoughts together and build work going forward in this space. So a lot of activity going on. And so as I mentioned, one of the things that's really important to look at when you're thinking about your agencies, what are the AI use cases, right? When you think about AI use cases, it's not about the AI and how it specifically can be used, but more about thinking about what are the use cases that as an agency you have. And then once you have those prioritized, how can different approaches be used to solve those mission priorities? And AI is one of those approaches, and it's certainly not the only one. And so what we've done this actually, and we are doing this at the VA, and we've created and are iterating on a list of use cases of how veterans, clinicians, and other stakeholders might engage with these AI-empowered processes to receive faster service, have better outcomes, have enhanced customer experience, and so forth. We found kind of these three major sections around healthcare, benefits, and enterprise-wide AI applications, and that's a work that's ongoing, and that'll a version of that will be kind of made, and so that it can be shareable, and so that we can all learn from some of this work that happened. We understand that other agencies are also creating such lists, and so as I mentioned, kind of understanding that mission, that's the first step. The next step is around building the capabilities, and people are the critical part of that for sure. So one thing that's really interesting now is that the AI job market is itself growing rapidly. So not just in the federal space, but across industry. And so that presents challenges in recruitment and retention for that talent on the global scale. So companies, government, academia, they're all competing for a rather limited pool. And we've seen that there are challenges across these different and various sectors. One of the things that we found really attracts people to government is around the mission area. And one of the things that with AI workforce development and so forth, is that we're really able to address some of these issues that it really takes both expertise, AI expertise around ethical issues, expertise around the domain area that you're applying the AI. All of these come together. And so there's really a need to make sure that bias, fairness, transparency, responsibility, and interpretability are a part of the AI that actually gets implemented. And this really comes back to then the trustworthy AI principles. There are these 9 principles anyone can take a look at that are part of the executive order that's now being implemented, and they include some of these aspects. I just want to draw people's attention. Also, there's recently an article called Workforce 4.0, talking about some of the challenges and ways of approaching developing this AI workforce of the future, especially looking at kind of the government industry interaction angle. And so that may be of interest to people. We'll have these slides available for people afterwards. And so as I mentioned, kind of a core of this is the advancement and implementation of trustworthy AI. And that's something that you see with essentially any new technology, is that for it to be adopted at first, you need for it to be trustworthy. So, and when that doesn't happen, then you see basically industry not adopting that. We have examples. For example, there have been cases, in industry or other sectors where For example, there were different blood tests or other types of tests that involved a new technology. And when that technology is not trusted, then it is not understood how it works, and it's further investigated, and it doesn't end up meeting expectations because it's not transparent and fully explainable and interpretable and so forth, then and reliable, robust, safe, and resistant to attacks and all that. If it doesn't have that, then it does, it may have some early adopters, but it won't actually be leveraged at the end. And so once a technology is leveraged and used, then some of the elements around being fully explainable each time may not be as necessary as long as that technology is based on is simply extending the existing work in some way. And that's how a number of different agencies have been approaching, for example, regulating different devices and things like that. And so what we so essentially that is what you see also with different, we mentioned blood tests and so forth. So the first few ones, you will need, special vigilance and really understanding. And then after that, when you go to the doctor today, you're not, and the doctor himself is not asking questions like, well, this blood test, will it work exactly in this way, or does it use this particular technology? Once it is in use, it is trusted, then it can be leveraged and used kind of with a different set of metrics. But especially at the beginning, it's very important to do this for getting adoption. And so we've been looking at how do you advance that trustworthy AI by developing AI technical guidance, like, for example, these checklists that can be used as standards for people who are implementing, developing AI and so forth across different sectors within that the VA is involved in. So, for example, clinicians are leveraging AI. What are the things that they need to think about when they apply AI? What do researchers need to think about when they're developing AI? Make sure it's not biased, use appropriate data sets and so forth. And so that's kind of one approach that has been taken. And the other areas, of course, being able to invest in the research and development, in the piloting, to make sure that, and iterate to make sure that these checklists, that these standards and governance structures actually work for enabling trustworthy AI and confidence in adopting of AI across the different stakeholders. So as I mentioned, the building the AI workforce is really one of the important areas toward facilitating trustworthy AI, because you need people with AI expertise to be able to determine and understand if the AI under the hood sort of structure is actually trustworthy, and if it cannot be fully explainable AI and interpreted, to at least understand that it can't go awry in terms of the types of inputs and outputs that you might see with that AI system. If it is a box that you can't look at underneath fully. And so that means basically fully test it for the range of possibilities that it would give. And so it's really important to have this AI workforce, not only to develop the AI, to implement the AI, for acquisitions of AI, to verify, and to regularly monitor that AI and to audit that AI over time. And so the VA is working with other agencies on evaluating knowledge in key domains of AI, and making sure and verifying that knowledge is there for either individuals within the VA that want to be and can be leveraged to do AI, or in recruiting and developing that talent outside of the VA. And in fact, a pilot is being executed to apply these efforts and to examine certifying of AI practitioner, researcher, and developer of knowledge. We're right now in the, I would say, in the planning stages of this, and looking forward to seeing the results of that work. So as I mentioned, the next step after kind of developing the capabilities of workforce, research and development, is also looking at partnerships. And that also takes us to the next step, which is about implementing and developing pilots, which can be done internally, could be done with external partners, with internal work as well. There are a number of different approaches. And so we've been executing an AI tech sprint for this theme around veterans not currently being served by the VA. Which is wrapped up, and we're looking forward to announcing the winners of that soon. There have been over 30 teams from industry, academia, and other non-governmental organizations in this year's particular challenge. And each team submitted a unique AI-enabled prototype for evaluation, leveraging the AIable ecosystem government innovation award-winning framework for incentivizing collaborations between government and industry. And so we can look forward toward a future showcase of the top projects later this year, and $100,000 in prizes will also be awarded, along with opportunities for further development toward next stages of the winning and recognized works. And so when we started thinking about what are potentially next steps that we can take in this area, we've been thinking about how AI and the brain are kind of in some ways similar and in some ways quite different, and how there could be synergy there. So essentially, the brain is an area that involves a number of different, at least in the healthcare system, types of clinicians, whether it be, a radiologist looking at imaging, whether it be a cancer doctor, hemonc, oncology physician looking at cancers like brain cancer, mental health, psychiatry. There are a lot of these different areas that all focus on the brain that are quite relevant to veterans, suicide risk, a number of depression, traumatic brain injuries. And AI is an area where, if you look actually at the definition within the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act 2019, it really talks about AI mimicking and trying to produce similar behavior to cognitive processes. So we thought about and are working together with NAVREF and others to really plan a forum around AI and the brain. And this event is going to be focused on ways in which AI can provide insights and developing treatments or therapeutics for different diseases, or understanding risks associated with brain and mental health. We're looking to bring in high-profile speakers to engage an audience and plan for to feature announcements of some of the current results, some collaborations, potentially some new partnerships and announcements around that. And we're currently seeking partners around that event. So if people are interested, to feel free to engage us on that. So looking ahead toward the future, it's really about scaling AI, taking these pilots, taking these ideas about trustworthy AI, and then once it's shown to be trustworthy, really taking the next step towards scaling. So there, it's about working with the programming offices around synergy, some of the area around policy work that we and others are involved in at the national level. And just want to again emphasize that now is really that special time to make a difference. That time where human performance and AI performance is really coming to this really inflection point and this intersection point. And so it's really an exciting time where any work in this area can make a huge difference going forward. And happy to talk to people in the future as well. Want to wish people a happy AI week. There are a lot of events around AI going this week, including this one. And kind of, leave email and, some contact information. Want to encourage people, if they're interested, also to sign up for the AI VA community. You don't have to be in the in the VA to sign up for this. It includes kind of insights about AI going on across the country at the hundreds of different facilities doing research at the VA and others that partners that are working with us, and really end with that. So I don't know if we have time for questions. We may or may not, but I'll pass it back to Kirsten then.
Thanks, Gil. We actually have one question. Maybe you can answer this real quick. In terms of AI and data strategy, does the VA partner with the JAIC at all, the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center?
Great question. We actually had a joint DoD VA session to develop a joint strategy that was, involved stakeholders across the VA. And involved the data, some of the Office of Enterprise Integration and some of the data efforts, as well as analytics. We are now also working with actually the JAIC and others on a few, on discussing a few specific items related to that strategy. And so there'll be more on that, I think, coming soon. The data and analytics strategy was a general framework that have been in discussions, and has specific items that now we're going to focus in more detail. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing with us. That was such an incredible keynote. I definitely failed the F test. I don't know what that says about me. I guess I need to work on my attention to detail, but it was great hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Up next, we will hear from our first Tech Talk of the day. Our first Tech Talk speaker is Guillaume Motier. Guillaume is the Senior Principal Technological Evangelist over at Red Hat. Guillaume, over to you.
To build data science pipelines with OpenShift, this presentation on how to build data science pipelines with OpenShift using Ceph, Kafka, and Knative. My name is Guillaume Moutier, and don't worry, I don't usually carry my sword with me. I am a technical evangelist in the Data Services Business Unit at Red Hat. I'm the former CTO of Laval University in Quebec City, Canada, and with now more than 20 years of experience in various roles in the industry. Now I'm focusing my work on data science platforms, data engineering, well, everything that relates to data all throughout its life cycle, from its gathering or ingestion, through processing, then to its archiving. But enough about me, let's talk about data. The most important thing that I want you to retain from this presentation is to embrace the cloud-native way of doing things. I'm not saying here that you must run everything in the cloud, no, not at all, but architectural patterns that we have seen emerge from cloud services can completely apply anywhere, including on-prem. And this is exactly what is helping a lot for data pipelines. But first thing first, how do we define this cloud-native approach? Here's my totally very opinionated short list of characteristics that we must aim at for a cloud-native data platform. First is agility and elasticity. You know, tools and frameworks and datasets, they evolve constantly and very rapidly, so you must be able to act accordingly with your infrastructures. Then cloud standards. I guess it's important to avoid any vendor lock-in with proprietary tools and formats. And we must embrace widely recognized open source protocols and standards. Hybrid cloud architecture. What you are designing in terms of architecture must run anywhere without any change, or maybe, some small configs that you can adapt, but not the architecture itself. Then automation. You must embrace the DevOps philosophy. Everything must be automated and code-based. And finally, separate compute from storage, and so that you can take advantage of the rich computing ecosystem against the central storage. To sum it up, it's all about agility, standards, and this ability to run everywhere. And all of that will allow us to reach our business goals, which are speed, efficiency, and adaptability. And I will say this last one again, as it seems to me is the most important one, adaptability. Now, let's take a look at a standard way of doing things. In this schema, I illustrated a standard data interaction where a user would produce a file that would be later on consumed by an application. What I don't like about this is the coupling that you have at different points. You know, the user who has to mount, let's say, a P drive on the computer, and same thing on the server side. The application, which relies on a very specific configuration of the application server, therefore making this difficult to scale, especially on demand. So that's why I really prefer this approach, using, for example, object storage, where all interactions are done in a disconnected mode. It's purely a put or a get command from whatever location where you have network communication. So this is definitely more agile. And then we can also use the bucket notification feature that is available with Ceph Object Storage. What it allows us to do in this example is to send a message to a Kafka topic whenever a file is uploaded or deleted. This topic can then be consumed by an OpenShift serverless service that can scale from 0 to whatever is needed to process this file. This is what I call a cloud-native architecture pattern. And now let's go for a demo where we'll see this architecture pattern applied to an automated X-ray analysis pipeline. The use case in this demo is about pneumonia detection from chest X-rays using an automated data pipeline. So imagine the problem is this one. We have some X-ray images to review, some from people having pneumonia, some people who have normal chest X-rays, and we want to automate this process. So of course we think that an AI ML model can help, and we can use tools that are provided by Open Data Hub, for example, you know, with Jupyter Notebooks and TensorFlow, and we can train a model to be able to do some inferencing on those images and determine if the new images that we want to process are from people having pneumonia or not. So we have this model, but it has to scale, so we have to automate it. So now the question is, how can we analyze those images as they come in for a continuous flow of thousands of images? And if we want to retrain the model and redeploy it seamlessly at various locations simultaneously, how can we efficiently do that? And again, my answer is to use cloud-native architecture and patterns with bucket notifications, with OpenShift Container Storage, Kafka topics with AMQ streams, and Knative eventing and serving with OpenShift Serverless. So here is our demo environment. Let's say we are at an hospital and we are generating new X-ray images. Okay, what we will do is send all those images into a bucket, into a Ceph bucket that has been instantiated by OpenShift Container Storage. And this bucket has been configured to send notifications whenever a new image is coming in. Those notifications will be sent to a Kafka topic that is linked to a Knative eventing and serving function. And the container that is spawned when a new message is coming in will do a risk assessment on this new image, you know, basically using the model that we have trained to try to infer if there is a risk of pneumonia or not. In a standard production scenario, all results would be sent to a doctor, but here I have added a special step because, of course, you know, not all models are totally perfect. There is a certain degree of uncertainty. And this is what I'm doing here. When the model is not able to have a certainty above 80%, what the process will do is anonymize the image, okay, so that it can be further processed in a central data science lab, for example. And normally, again, in a standard production environment, you would have a doctor, a specialist doing a manual assessment and a classification of this image for which the model was not able to infer the result. It would be classified as a risk of pneumonia or being normal, and this would trigger a retrain of the model that could be re-injected here back to our hospital origin through a standard OpenShift CI/CD. Okay, this second part here with the model retraining and everything, we won't see it in the demo. It's not implemented because training a model like this takes a certain time, but I have a way to simulate a new model being used to do those inferences. And to make the link with the scenario that we described before, we can imagine that in multiple hospitals, there is also the same model being used to make some inferencing on images. Okay, and again, images for which the model is not so sure about the result, those images would be anonymized and sent for further processing here. Okay, let's see that live. Okay, let me walk you through the environment I have prepared. Here is my OpenShift cluster, where I have a few things that I have created for this demo. First, there is here this deployment config of what I call the image generator. This is a container that will, well, in fact, it won't generate X-ray images. It will just copy randomly source X-ray images that I have in a bucket. It will pick randomly some images and send them, copy them to an incoming bucket. Okay, we can see that here the image generator is deployed. There is one pod running, that's the blue circle here, indicating that this deployment configuration is up and running. But at this moment, it doesn't do anything. I have a parameter here that is set now to 0 that makes it sitting idle, not sending any image. I have here a Kafka source that is called X-ray images. So what this container is doing is just listening to a Kafka topic and waiting for some messages to come in. And we can see here that this Kafka source is connected, is linked to this service, to this serverless, this Knative. You can see the logo here, the Knative service that is called Risk Assessment. So this is a full serverless container, serverless deployment. So meaning that right now, as there is nothing to process, it's just also sitting idle. So we can see here there's no blue circle around the container, meaning that it is scaled down to 0. There is no instance of the risk assessment container running. I have a few other things that are deployed. First is my Kafka cluster, deployed through the AMQStreams operator. So very basic here, only one instance of Kafka and Zookeeper. It's totally ephemeral Kafka cluster. Please don't do this at home. Normally you don't want to run only with one instance of each, but for research purposes here, it's enough for what we want to do. So all the notifications from the Ceph bucket that will receive the image will be sent to a topic in this Kafka cluster. And this is to this cluster that we have here our Kafka source subscriber that is listening to the specific topic we want. Okay. We have also a deployment of Grafana with its own operator. That's a dashboard that will allow us to see what's going on. And I have also a few helpers here. I have a small database, a very basic MariaDB database, where I will record the names and timestamps of the images as they're coming or being processed or being anonymized. And this is what we will also display in the Grafana dashboard. And finally, I have a small image server. As you will see on the dashboard, we will display directly the images as they are coming in. So here is everything that I have deployed, and we are now ready to launch the image generation. What I will do now is launch the demo. And to do that, I will patch the image generator Remember the value that is set to 0 to idle it. I will make it now be 1 second. So that means that now a new image will be generated, will be copied inside our incoming bucket every second. Let's launch that. So I've launched the command, and the image generator will be patched with this new version. We can see here that it has already deployed. It went very fast. It has deployed the new version, and now it will begin to copy every second a new image. And we can already see that something is happening here. You have noticed here that my risk assessment pod has now been spawned. There is something happening. So that means that we have our workflow going. The image generator is putting up new images inside our Ceph bucket, which triggers a notification to our Kafka topic. Here we have our Kafka listener that retrieved the message and pass it to the risk assessment pod for the image to be processed. Let's have a look at what it looks like now. So here is the Grafana dashboard that represents in real time what's happening in our pipeline. On the top left here, we have a summarized schema on this pipeline. So we can see the images are being sent to an incoming bucket here, and we have the counter of the number of images that have been uploaded so far. Then, as notifications are sent to a Kafka topic, and the risk assessment container has been launched, we have the number of images processed. And again, if the certainty of our model is less than 80%, then we will have another function that will anonymize those images. Okay, so we can see that the pipeline is running. On the right side, we have the list of the last 10 uploaded images. Okay, and don't worry, those are totally random generated names and birth date and other personal information. Those are not real patients here. We have also, again, the list of the last 10 uploaded images, then the last 10 processed images, and we'll see in a few seconds what is happening on those images, and then the last 10 anonymized images. We have some counters on the left side. The CPU and RAM usage that you can see has increased because now we have some processing to do. We have the number of risk assessment containers which have been launched so far to be able to handle the load. Again, this is something that is automatically scaled by OpenShift serverless. And then we have here a risk distribution. So far, within all the images that have been...
Excellent presentation. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for that. So we are going to now move on to our next panel. Our first panel of the day, actually, and I'll introduce the moderator for that. We have Nicole Johnson. Nicole is the managing editor over at GovLoop and also a friend of ATARC. So Nicole, I will pass it over to you and your panel.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. We have so much to pack. I'm very excited about this panel, so much to pack in. If our panelists can go ahead and get their cameras on, I'll give you all a brief introduction to what we'll be talking about today. Ooh, Tom has a very cool lighting. I like that in the background. Well, welcome to all of those of you who have joined for the first time. For those of you coming back from the morning keynote, thank you so much. For this panel, we really want to tap into the expertise and thought leadership of federal chief data officers and leaders to hear how they view the use of AI and other analytical work across government. We'll talk about use cases, lessons learned, barriers, and what's on the horizon. As I mentioned, we have a lot to pack in, but we want to make sure that we get to your questions, so you can use that Q&A box on your screen to submit those, and I'll get to as many as I can during the Q&A portion. And I also want to remind you to answer the poll questions throughout today's panel if you'd like to be eligible for CPE credits. So to kick things off, rather than reading the extensive bios of our panelists, I want you to hear directly from them. And we know that all CDOs don't have the same roles. So I'd like if each of you could briefly tell us what your responsibilities entail, kind of what's your purview, and also what's top of mind for you at the moment as it relates to data and AI in government. And Damien, since I'm looking right at you, you're on my left side, I'll start with you first.
Sure. Hi, I'm Damien Kostick. So I'm representing the Chief Data Office for USCIS, and I oversee AI/ML, business intelligence, basically advanced analytics over in this area. Anyway, I think if there's anything we can say, we'll get into all the questions going in here, but I don't want to suck up the line from here. But just know that we're definitely into AI/ML and in many different aspects and ways. Including traditional development, but also looking into RPA and other types of avenues. But anyway, got lots to talk about with data governance and data quality, but I'll hand it over to the next person.
Awesome. And Tom, purple is my favorite color. I think that's purple in the background. So I'll go to you next.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a lot of our, the way we structured our data program, I should say, for the Department of the Navy is really around following what was stated in the Open Government Data Act. So a lot of my statutory authorities are drawn from there. Well, in fact, all of them are drawn from there. So what we've done is we've kind of tried to align our activities against the authorities in the statute, as well as the Federal Data Strategy Action Plan. So there's a lot of activities that are going on, right? So we spent probably the first year or two since I've been here trying to get the program stood up, getting it organized, getting understanding a baseline of where the Department of the Navy is with the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps as well. So we are now transitioning, I would say, from that kind of getting our sea legs into more of an operationalizing what we have in terms of the data and data strategy. So we have the Federal Data Strategy, Federal Data Action Plan, but we also have the DoD Data Strategy, and now just recently released the Creating Data Advantage from the DepSecDef memo that was sent out to try and help us better organize what we're doing around data. So we have established an enterprise data environment, and so one of our primary goals over the next 12 to 18 months, if not longer, is to get the data into that environment, get it integrated, get it cleaned, get it curated, and make it available for use. So with that, we'll just pass it on to the next person and see where we want to go here with the panel.
Perfect. Mike, let's go over to you. Oh, I wonder if you might be on mute. That was just a test run. He's seeing if we were listening. Well, let's try that again. Maybe I might go to Justin while Mike. Oh, there you go. There you go.
All right. A little troubleshooting to start the day. Well, thanks so much, Nicole, for having me on. I really do appreciate it. And just a shout out to Damien. I'm so glad to see him here representing the operating components of DHS. I'm Mike Horton. I'm the Chief Data Officer for DHS and newly appointed, a couple of weeks in the job. My role here is really to just highlight some of the work that's being done down at the operating components and collect those best practices and use our platform in a strategic way to try to help share that data between domains and between components where maybe traditionally they've been siloed. We're taking just like Tom said, Federal Data Strategy is a roadmap for us, trying to implement that, build this program, and share this data to help our customers and support this mission.
Perfect. We already have synergy early on. I love that. And last but not least, Justin.
Thanks, Nicole. Can you hear me okay?
Sound great.
Okay, great. Hi, thanks for having me here. I'm Justin Marsico. I'm the Chief Data Officer for the Fiscal Service, which is a part of the Treasury Department. And let me just say a quick word about what we do in case people aren't familiar with the Fiscal Service. We help to manage the finances of the federal government. So we interface with every agency about how much money they've been appropriated, how much they're spending, and we reconcile all that information at Treasury. My office and my particular function is to make some of the data that we collect on the government-wide community and financial management and the fiscal activities of the federal government available to the public. So we run a website called USA Spending, which has information on contracts, grants, and agency spending. We also publish a lot of other data about the activities of the federal government, like information on the debt, deficit, revenue coming into the government, the gold reserves, the official exchange rates. And so we have another website that we run called Fiscal Data, which you can find at fiscaldata.treasury.gov. Appreciate anyone's feedback on any of those two products. And the other role that I have is thinking about our data strategy and what we're doing to modernize our data footprint internally with all the data that we have. I just wanted to follow up on something that Tom said a minute ago. I think a common experience for many CDOs in government is that we are either standing up an office or we have been standing up an office, and now we're trying to get to the next step of like what operations look like. So there's like a lot of administrative stuff that comes with that, but also, even once a CDO office is created and functioning, one of the roles of a CDO across private sector, public sector is being a change agent. So I just wanted to say that's like something we're always thinking about is like, how do we do things better? How do we use data more efficiently? How can we improve the business that we do using data?
I love that. And that really helps us segue into the next question. I'm so glad you mentioned that, Justin. It's like, so we have this office, right? So what does operationalization actually look like? What are we doing? And I think for people, it's nice to hear about use cases because then it kind of provides a tangible look at, so how have you either implemented or, moved the ball forward when it comes to either AI or any type of analytical work? And if you could talk about maybe the impact or the outcomes of that. And since, Tom, you keep being the reference point, I might start with you on any use case and kind of what the impact or outcome has been.
Sure, absolutely. So, everyone's already kind of mentioned we're setting the foundation. The data thing is not new, but having a chief data officer and integrating that function into the way that the organization operates is new. And I will say for an organization the size of the Department of Defense and the size of the Department of Navy, it has not been as maybe straightforward as one would expect, or maybe it is exactly how one would expect. It depends on your perspective and your background there. So, one of the things that the Navy actually started doing a number of years ago was looking into various readiness issues. And as we get into more of these contested environments and looking at the peer adversary fight, right? How ready are we to go to war? And so aircraft availability was one of the primary use cases we started digging in on. The original thought was around this activity that the reason the aircrafts weren't necessarily at the availability rate that we were looking for is because we had some sort of supply chain issue. We didn't have the right parts and the parts weren't being, maybe delivered on time or something like this. So what we did is we actually took data management, data integration, artificial intelligence algorithms, machine learning algorithms, and we started gathering all the data, looking into the exact reasons, or what we're calling the drivers, for why we didn't have the availability aircraft that we were looking for. And so the outcome of this activity actually is something that we're calling a driver tree. And it turns out using not only the data, but the functional expertise in the field, the things that we thought were the issues that were roadblockers to the availability we're looking for turned out to not be the blockers, right? And so this was kind of a little bit of an epiphany or an aha moment, if you were. So that allowed us to actually take what I would characterize as strategic steps in making the, increasing the availability of the aircraft instead of what we'd call the kind of hero activities that you would normally see. So typically when you see a mandate go off and do, people rally together and we go off and we get it done, but we can't sustain what we did because we don't have that systemic change in place that was required. So by using the data and the artificial intelligence algorithms and the predictions that they were giving us, we were able to actually make some strategic changes to how we approached aircraft maintenance in general, not just pure availability of the aircraft, right? And so we are now hitting our maintenance targets. We are hitting our availability targets. We are now more ready to defend the nation, as it were, right? But that allows us to now sustain this going forward. So rather than simply saying, give us more money or give us more people, right? We knew we dug in on those specific levers, and we were now able to identify the levers and pull them as required. And so we are much better positioned. I would say we are better positioned moving forward now to apply that same methodology to different problem sets across the Department of Navy. So I always like to highlight that as a really good use case, because it was a confluence of bringing the functional people together, bringing the data scientists and the data experts together, as well as senior leadership championing of this issue, to bring it all together and show that we can actually have a strategic change in the way that we're approaching a problem that is now pervasive throughout the U.S. Navy anyway, right? And so that's something that doesn't happen very often in the DoD and the DON. So I think that's probably the best example of the use case I could say for some of the changes we've made over time.
Yeah, no, that was great and very practical. I think the challenge sometimes is you talk about AI, but it's like trying to wrap your head. Can you give me an actual example of how this is practically being used, not a far off fantasy like years from now? So I like that it was very actionable and immediate. So switching missions, Mike. Aircraft's probably not up your alley, but if you could give us a use case. Oh, well, let me not say that. A use case and maybe outcomes and impacts you can share. And then Damien, you can maybe feed off of what Mike is sharing. And then we'll get to you, Justin.
Well, thanks, thanks, Nicole. A great example for us is the VAL program, the Vaccinate Our Workforce. So very recently, you may notice we've had some difficulty in the pandemic world. So when vaccinations were a big priority for the administration, and especially vaccinating our frontline workforce, we found ourselves in a situation where we can only control, or at least sort of impact one portion of that, which is we can provide the data on the people that we wanted to get vaccinated. So we took that as our piece. Hey, look, who are our ones, who are our 1As, who are our 1Bs, sorted all that data, found out that data comes from a lot of different places. And it helped us understand, at least in this use case, how disparate the data is in DHS and across the components. Then we had to step outside DHS and work closely with the VA and with HHS. Some of our data from HHS came in a totally different way, from a totally different system. Same thing goes with VA. They had a very specific way of dealing with data, much more mature than us, at least this high up in DHS. We found ourselves in a situation where we had to sort that data and get it right. Our goal was to get those vaccinations out to the people as quickly as we could. This is a national safety issue, a health issue. Impacted our workforce, something we care a lot about. So that correlation of data and that managing of that data on a daily basis to update those lists and get our employees vaccinated as quickly and as efficiently as we could, working with multiple agencies across government, I think it really highlighted how good data shared can serve the people.
Perfect. Damien, yes, over to you. Love to hear a use case.
Sure. And I think maybe to fill a gap, maybe, I don't know what other people will bring up here, but to leverage off of what both Tom and Mike talked about, I'm going to go to that level of metadata for a second and show how I always kind of like the Bass commercial, that says we don't really make the products that you use, we make them better. And when you think about like data quality, data governance, trying to get trust and culture change inside of your organization, to be able to really bolster all of that, I'll mention that AI, ML capabilities really need to also be looked at, not just the operational outputs, but also what serves all those operational outputs. Example, one of the key things when we get to automation is that, right, when you move and transition a whole culture out of a manual workload, you're really talking about going from a group of people who are producing, let's say, widgets tens per hour to thousands per hour. There's a lot more risk to making a big mistake real fast, right? So in order to kind of buffer that, you need to have extremely fast recognition of data quality error. And this goes to data governance, data quality, but also to the public trust, right, component of what you're doing. And so applying AI and ML, for example, to looking at quick, efficient means to trigger alerts of data quality so that your whole program doesn't fall apart becomes really important. And we've had some use cases where we start to apply that, whether it's looking at entity resolution, looking at aspects of metadata, and whether or not there's dropouts or massive change in rates between certain kind of feeder data into these different data pipelines. And I'll make one more allusion, maybe we'll get to this later on, but I'll make an allusion to when you look at those future outcomes for automation, where AI and ML fit into it, and you start to back propagate all of your planning to get to that endpoint, you realize that you're actually at a very broad cross whole agency view of all the things you have to do between, like we've heard about HR, right? But all these different aspects. But in particular, I guess I'm going to harbor on is that data governance right at the very beginning, getting it strong and using AI in that context to really trigger fast alerts for downstream operations. Trying to think if there's anything else I'd want to put in there, but maybe we'll move on to the next person and we'll fill in for more context later on.
Absolutely. Justin, use case and impact. A lot going on at Treasury. I imagine your hands are full.
Yeah, but before I talk about a use case, I just want to say one thing that we think about is like a lot of like, what are the right use cases for us to be working on? And I think it's just important to say that, you know, selecting a use case for analytics or AI needs to have the same kind of criteria that you'd use for any kind of project or business strategy that you're going to deploy. In other words, it needs to make you more effective or more efficient at delivering services or delivering your mission, or help to reduce costs in some way. So we really try to focus on asking ourselves those questions as like use cases are bubbling up and we're trying to generate them. So one that is really big for us now that we're working on is focused on reducing costs. And it has to do with the fact that, you know, in the federal government, the structure of an organization, like the structure of the bureaucracy is very determinative for everything that it does. And you can see this when you go to every single federal government website. You go to the website and you can see the structure of the organization. You know, if you want, you know, a certain type of document, you got to like find the office that makes it and get it in there. And that kind of approach doesn't really work for data. It means that we've inherited data architecture that is, you know, set up so that, you know, every SES in the organization has their own system or set of systems, and then their own data warehouses or, you know, analytics tools that are sitting on top of those. And, you know, the total picture once you do business like that is that you're spending money in lots of different places over and over and over again. And you're reducing the interoperability of the data and the insights that you can get from it. So anyway, our use case, our project that we're thinking about right now is how do we bring all of that data together, and instead of deploying an AI tool like over here and over here and over here, bring the data together so we can have one thing that works across the organization. And we're just in the beginning phases of that, but I'm really excited about the possibilities there.
So much going on, very active, and a very good place for us to start with our first poll for the day. So Alyssa, if you can go ahead and get that poll question up, hopefully it's on folks' screen. So the question is, in your opinion, how has your agency done in embracing the new normal in the federal AI and data analytics space? Maybe great, we fully embraced it. Maybe you're still working on embracing the new normal, whatever that is. Maybe you're working toward embracing it and still have a great deal of work to do. And maybe you haven't embraced it at all. So we'd like you to get those questions in. And I'll pause here with the panel because there's so much that we've talked about. I always like to give our panelists, if there was something someone said that you're like, wait, I know Damien was thinking, maybe we'll get back to something. So before I hop into my next question, if there's anything that you all heard that you want to tease out a little more or bring up, certainly want to leave you space to do that.
I can hop on that train for a second.
Sure.
But maybe actually to tether, actually, I love what Justin was saying there. And again, to kind of tie some of us up, one thing about that back propagation, against those kinds of foreshadowing for this, but is that we've definitely recognized similarly, we have to come up with a concentrated single, whether you want to use the word data lake, but an architecture that really tries to bring it in. Like reuse has got to be the word du jour for going forward. And I'll bring up again that data governance and data quality component, right? Think of this, right? If you've got 1,000 mistakes that can be made very quickly because your data quality suddenly goes really bad. Well, if you have that all splayed out across, right, in different siloed data sets all over the place, like Justin was talking about. How hard is that going to be to try and correct the data quickly so that you can get back to your operations? It's really difficult. So you want to have it concentrated in a single space. And I think maybe that's kind of part of that culture change, but that's kind of hard for some people to get over, because they like having their little silos and they like having their direct control. But the reality is that's not very functional when we get to a high speed AI ML world. It just functionally won't work very well. And that's definitely been a bit of a hiccup, I think, with some people, is to realize that, yes, okay, we can not only put our data storage in a certain place, but also our data processing in the same place, and to get them over the hump of realizing that's actually going to help with their timeliness, not just in the movement of data, but time. Anyway, so all kinds of features. But I see Justin nodding his head, and Tom, so maybe I'll hand it at, and Justin, you're off mute, so maybe you've got some stuff you want to follow up on.
Well, we did have a question come in, and I'm looking at the results here. It looks like, a lot of people are still working toward embracing the new normal. We know culture, it's a thing, right? It's real. We had a question that came in, and, maybe I'll start with you, Tom. So the question is, how much effort is there to educate senior leadership to the advantages of AI ML? Maybe ease the classical fears of data privacy to allow a wider inception of the technology. This person is recalling some challenges with convincing executive leadership at a Navy shipyard, we will not mention which one, to sincerely understand AI ML and its advantages, and it not just being a fad. So I don't know, Tom, how do we get our senior friends on board?
Yeah, well, so when we were reading the question, I was actually sitting here thinking, well, I don't have any issue with our senior leadership that I hang around with. They're all fully on board. And then you said, oh, shipyard. And I'm like, well, because what I was going to say is it's actually that middle tier leadership that seems to have the biggest issue with not only data and data management, artificial intelligence, the application of some of these newer technologies. But the word du jour for us recently, and Justin hinted at it a little bit, right? Which is the fear of transparency, right? And so what we're seeing is we have a bunch of data miners, right? Not people that are digging for data, but people that are hoarding data. They're saying it's mine, you can't have it, right? And there's a lot of cultural reasons, cultural barriers for this, right? I've heard this from other people before, which is, oh, I don't want you looking over my shoulder. But simultaneously, I've also heard senior leaders saying, well, it's my right to look over your shoulder because, you're part of my command and I need to understand what you're doing, right? And so, well, you won't understand the data, you're going to misuse the data. Well, if that's true, the counter argument that we've been trying to make from a cultural perspective to kind of increase that acumen of the workforce, right, is, well, if I don't understand the data and it's your data, then it's your right, it's your obligation to help me understand the data and how I can use the data and make better decisions by using the data, right? And so something my old boss used to say, which I've grown fond of because I found it, it's a useful tool, right? It's called discovery, then recovery, right? You have to really discover where you are in the story, and then plan your path based on what you've discovered, right? If you fear the discovery process, you're never going to be able to recover from where you are, right? And we all know that we're not in great places, at least in the Department of the Navy and the DoD kind of writ large, when it comes to data management, as well as the use of data for decision-making purposes, right? And so I would say, from a senior leadership perspective, whatever that means to you, whatever echelon you're at, right, is you need to talk about the benefits of using data to make decisions in a non-technical way in language that they understand and that they speak, right? So in the case of ship maintenance and the operations of our shipbuilding enterprise, right, that is an area that has become a focus area for the VCNO, the Vice Chief Naval Operations. And so it's going to get a lot of attention over the next probably 12 to 18 months. There's going to be a lot of resistance, I think, there. We've privatized a lot of our shipbuilding. And so there's also some legal issues about, what data can we have, what data can't we have, and that kind of stuff like that. And that legality issue kind of spans a lot of issues there. But what I've said to it literally just yesterday to my folks is don't try to solve the hardest problem without going after the easy problems, right? And so the things that we can do now that we know that we can do, let's do them while simultaneously picking away at those more difficult, more prickly problems. And so for the Navy folks out there, we just had a thing called NFOSIS, which is a Navy Senior Leader Forum, right? They're talking a lot about the navigation plan and the navigation plan, the implementation framework. And so that's going to start taking root real quickly. And what I'm trying to do, I think it was either Damien or Justin, I don't remember, talking about being a champion, right? I'm trying to help educate the senior leaderships on why it's a good thing to participate in this process, and bring your questions. Senior leaders have questions all the time. They're always asked questions, and they are asking questions, right? Bring your questions. That'll help us prioritize what data we should go after first, right? Because the data that is going to answer a question that someone's asking is far more valuable than just random data that we stick into a system, right? And then if they participate with these key questions, then it becomes interactive, it becomes personal, right? They are now have a vested interest in helping us answer the question because it is their question, right? And so at Echelon, in the Department of the Navy, we're trying to identify key questions for those commanders and answer those questions with them through analytics, dashboards, algorithms, whatever it takes, right? And so we're pairing those data professionals with the senior leaders, with the functional element, the folks who understand the data the most, and coming together to produce decision-making outcomes using data and data analytics. So make them part of the process is my best advice. And be careful of it getting done to you instead of you assisting in the process.
That's good. It really gets to an issue that my new friend Cynthia asked about, data literacy, which I'm going to ask, but pause to get our second poll up. I want to make sure we get through all our polls so folks can get their CPE credits. So the second poll that should be coming up on your screen here shortly is, how far along is your agency with implementing AI across the agency? Maybe you're already finished, you've just begun, you're planning to implement, or you have no plans to implement, or maybe you're not sure, which is totally fine. So while you all are getting that answered, I want to go to, I saw Mike nodding his head as well, but this question came up about data literacy and raising the level of data literacy across your organization. Do you have focused outreach, training initiatives to help raise literacy levels? I know, Tom, you talked some about how, you're working on that. And Justin, we in our prep call talked about it. So maybe, Mike, if you want to share anything at DHS, then we can build on that.
I will, and thanks. So I think it ties really closely into the previous question about educating and informing leadership about what data can do for the mission in spaces maybe that is a little farther down in the stack. I think there's, I know there's great data work happening at the components. And of course, I'm nodding to Damien and the work that he does. That immigration data domain for us here at DHS is the most mature and the most productive of the domains we have. So getting that story told and helping people understand that a culture of sharing data and a culture of pushing data up to provide product and decision-making data for leadership helps the mission, and our willingness to share. And at the enterprise level, we're doing things like an enterprise level data inventory when we're asking people, we're listening. I think that's important too at this level. The work's being done, but for us to listen to the Damiens in DHS to say, what are you doing? And tell us about the products that you're delivering. Tell us about how you're helping the mission. And we share those stories both across and up to help people understand how important data sharing can be to the accomplishment of the mission. And I think it's a lot of outreach, it's a lot of listening, it's a lot of sharing, a lot of collaboration. But from my perspective, at this level, it's really about collaboration on those successes and that great work that's being done down in the department within the components. And our goal here at headquarters is to bring that up a few levels.
I love that. And I know, Justin, you were telling me about like communities that you were building, because I think for some people you hear the word AI, and I think our poll really is representative of this. There are a number of people, 32%, who said they're just not sure how far along their agency is. And for some people, you might say, AI, that really doesn't relate to my job. It seems far off. But how are you kind of normalizing the conversation, bringing in people across all different types of analytical work, if you can tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. And I just wanted to agree with with Mike's insight that these two questions are like a part of the same whole. You know, whether it's data literacy and understanding data at the senior leader level or at the staff level, it's all about changing the culture. You know, we have a little thought experiment that we did over the last year, which is like, you know, we know what all of our data architecture problems are. I kind of outlined those for you before. Like, what if we closed our eyes and snapped our fingers and all of that was changed? Like, we had all of our data, you know, magically flowing into one area instead of like, you know, batch processes that breaks. It's all like API automation driven. The metadata is like all good. Data dictionaries are all there. We have analytics tools sitting on top of that. Like, would that change the needle? Like, would that push the needle for our organization? And the answer is no, because we still have the same people who are working in the organization. We still have the same leaders who are in the organization. And that kind of led us to think like the cultural change part of it is actually really important and something that we need to pay attention to. So yeah, we have communities of practice, you know, people who are doing analysis and want to help build their skills that my team leads. And then we use those forums to deliver training to them. So, you know, people are interested in building dashboards. We're giving them training on Power BI and on Tableau and how to use those tools. The other thing I think about, and I think it's like really important, is that, you know, you can bring in some of the most talented data scientists in the world and, you know, put them in a data organization. But if they're not connected to the business, they're not going to do really good work. Because the questions that the business needs to solve are known by the business areas. So like what we're trying to do is like spread out the knowledge of data and analytics so that even if somebody over here in this business area isn't able to execute an AI analysis, they know like, oh, this is something which we could do better with NLP. And then they raise their hand and then we have the conversation with them. So that's like part of what changing the culture, I think, helps us to do.
I love that. And I just want you to know, Tom, the question that was asked earlier about the shipyard and folks, you get a big thank you for validating the approach at this time. So thank you for confirming that. I want to go back to something that, you know, Damien touched on. I think we've heard the word trust come up several times. And I'd like to also add in another word, equity. We've heard that a lot with the current administration, that being a big focus. And I think even now, there's been a notice out on the Federal Register. We know that agencies are going through the programs and seeing, you know, how do we assess equity and what does that look like? And so I imagine our data friends will play a big role in that. So I don't know, Damien, if you can talk about maybe how things like trust and equity are shaping the work that you do. I don't know if there's an example you can share. Love to hear it. Yeah.
You know, definitely, I think Mike and we in DHS would definitely agree culture change is huge, and it can't all be done, I'd say, entirely internally. You know, it's funny. So just to touch on that aspect just for a second, this kind of goes along the lines of data literacy, but also trust is right. We don't live in a communications isolation tank, right? When people see things from GAO or from OPM that say, "Hey, AI is coming," right? Like several years ago, or we start to hear things from our partners. Hey, we're doing this. Hey, we're doing that. Right? All of that actually helps. Like on some level, I'd love it if all the federal agencies were out there singing to some degree what they are doing to progress towards it. Not that it's just this abstract future out there, and that it's not this evil monster. Right? There isn't a robot coming to take your job, and right, and these horrible things aren't going to come. Right? There are very good positive outcomes. Anyway, so I just wanted to mention that as terms of the larger trust internally. I've got to say has been a slow. I don't know how anybody would say it's been fast, but it's been kind of you know, it can be a slow process, and you have to show again the wins. So I felt like internally, like when we were able to show that machine learning could be applied successfully for a large public program. And internally, and I'll just make a reference to, like, for instance, like things like entity resolution for helping to, right, I finally identify and help to bring together large clumps of disparate data together and show, oh, this is one person, right? And we can properly like help help these people along in the process of whatever it is that we're trying to do. Those use cases finally were able to start showing value and started selling to leadership that it is viable, it is possible. So I'll definitely, anyway, but I'll loop back to the other one. It's again, it's a holistic kind of effort of trying to build trust. And I love hearing anything from our DHS senior leadership about the future, anything from S&T, right, from the CIO, whatever, we'll take it. And from Treasury or Defense, whatever, right? Well, anybody who's willing to kind of share those information so that it begins to filter into people's brains through public sources, through internal federal sources, and our own stories. They begin to hear, these narratives. Again, taking things from the abstract into the tangible, and that, I think, that last line, from the abstract to the tangible, is the key aspect. Because when it's abstract, people just have every fear in the planet. When it's tangible, they calm down and they seem much happier with everything. Anyway.
Yeah, no, we just got a comment that came in, and asking when these internal trainings are happening around AI and data science, is there focus on the art of the possible, but also demystifying? So if there is something that you all are specifically doing that helps to address that, maybe some best practices or quick bullet points on how you address that, what you're showing people art of the possible to demystify. Is there any examples? I'll kind of open it up.
Yeah, hey, this is Tom. I'll just say that, we're struggling with the kind of training aspects of a lot of this. So part of our evolution of our workforce, we have a line of effort to evolve our workforce, which is code for increasing the general acumen around data and data science, right? We are struggling to demystify it, because what we're seeing is data science is a scientific field that is intrinsically technical in nature, right? And so Damon mentioned, entity extraction. I won't name the senior leaders' eyes that rolled back into their head when I started talking about disambiguation of entities and the confidence level we might have in that, and the extraction of sentiment out of natural language processing algorithms, right? Don't care, simply don't care whenever I speak in those sort of words. Now the data science professionals are, they start salivating when I start talking about this, how we have a new NLP tool in our enterprise data platform, right? And I apologize, I have a dog trying to get in right here. So she's very unhappy right now. But anyway, so what we're trying to do is what words can we use to make them comfortable? And you mentioned demystification, right? So we're tiering our approach. We have what we call our general data citizen that we've established, right? These are the digital citizens that we're trying to say, how do we get them up to speed with generalities, right? We have our senior leaders. How can they use this technology to help them solve strategic problems, right? And then I mentioned that kind of middle, what I would call is our maybe echelon 2, echelon 3 commanders, echelon 4 commanders, right? How can they benefit from this, right? So for that middle tier, we're actually finding that much more difficult, because we need to speak in their terms, something that is very mission focused, very specific to what they're doing, but then put it in, this is how it's going to help us up at the secretariat level, or how it's going to help your next line commander up the food chain. So we have some formal training that we're going through to train data engineers, data scientists on the aspects of data, that kind of data acumen there. But the thing that we're trying to get with right now is we're not just solely focused on data scientists. It turns out that that's about 1% of our population, right? What we need to do is get the functional people who are using the data, creating the data on a daily basis, get them to understand the outcomes of maybe not entering such high quality data into the system, and get them to understand if they want to use the data to do their job, right? The implications of maybe switching someone, I forget who it was, it might've been Mike, mentioned the automation aspects, right? So people are just become ridiculously comfortable with spreadsheets, and spending hours plugging away on a spreadsheet. And getting them comfortable with the fact, hey, maybe a computer can do that for you in a fraction of the time that you're doing it. And so by way of example, I like quantifiable examples, right? We had one particular piece of information that was generated on a daily basis for our senior leaders. And interestingly enough, it was taking somewhere on the order of 36 person hours to generate this briefing. And it turns out all they were doing was just gathering a bunch of different information from different people and putting it, kind of pasting it onto a slide. And that was the information was gathered from websites. So it's very easy to take and just pull information from different websites and put it into a report and generate it automatically. And so we actually used an RPA technology to do this. And so now it just runs overnight, and it's there in the morning when the military assistants and the XOs and everyone just kind of show up. And literally the guy stopped me in the hallway and he was saying, "Thank you so much," because I literally got up at 4 a.m. every single day, and all I did for 3 hours was build this, and it was never right.
Oh, very busy, very busy. I know we have like 1 minute left. I'm going to try to slide in that last poll question real quick. What has been the greatest challenge when adopting AI across your agency? And maybe I can give each of you 10 seconds since we have like none. But if there is kind of one takeaway or best practice that you can share, and maybe it was shaped by COVID-19 and what happened. Oh, we're at time, but maybe like 2 seconds, you can share one best practice and then we can wrap up. So maybe I'll start with you, Justin, Mike, Damien, and then Tom, you can end. Is there one quick takeaway?
One thing that's been notable about the pandemic, since we're all working remote, is a lot of the paper-based processes where you'd go and talk to somebody and get a signature on a document. They're a little bit harder. So I think that makes adopting AI and automated use cases a little bit easier. So I would encourage everybody to think about like, what are those paper-based processes that are a little more painful today that we can automate?
Perfect. Mike?
Yeah, I think it's culture, it's adoption and buy-in, and credit to Damien for setting me up for that. But it's wonderful to hear from smart people like Tom and Justin and Damien as well about how the technology stack is probably the easy part.
Perfect. And Damien?
Yeah, get some dashboards out there and make people really cozy with seeing the data in a tangible way and explanatory, and maybe that'll help you out.
Maybe, hopefully. All right, Tom, you'll bring us home.
Yeah, so the thing that we really found is exactly what Damien said, right? Show people the data, explain to them why it's not awesome, explain to them how they can help make it better, and how they can integrate it into their decision-making processes. And then by using the data to make decisions on a regular basis, we have found that data intrinsically gets better, right? So if you're using something, it has a tendency to get stronger and better and happier. And so that's the number one takeaway. We started using our data for our logistics and supply chain for COVID. And miraculously, we now have a much better handle on where our PPV is. So that's a positive outcome.
Very positive outcome. If you guys can join me in giving a virtual round of applause to our amazing panel. Thank you so much. And with that, I will turn it over to Kirsten for our next panel.
Excellent. Thank you, Nicole and panelists. Up next, before our second panel of the day, we will be hearing from our other 2 tech talks. Up first, we will hear from Andy McIsaac. Andy is the Director of Solutions Marketing for the Public Sector over at Alteryx. Andy, over to you.
Hey, thank you very much for having me today. Let me just start the screen share. Hopefully you're seeing, just let me know, are you seeing the screen share?
Not yet.
Okay, let me just do that again. Oh, yeah, there we go.
Now we got it.
Cool, thank you. Okay, well, my name is Andy McIsaac. I am the Solutions Marketing Director for the Public Sector here at Alteryx. Loving the discussion so far. I love, Thomas, what you said, people ridiculously comfortable with spreadsheets. And that's something that we try to alleviate every day and what we do with public sector clients and our commercial clients as well. Alteryx is a analytics automation platform, which we really work hard to try and upscale people. When we're talking about AI and ML and analytics, it's really all about digital transformation. And the keys to digital transformation are being able to democratize the data, better utilize the data, also govern the, make sure you have strong governance around the data, build higher quality into your data. And then secondly, you need to look at, automating those processes. How do you get people out of using spreadsheets or even using paper and automating those analytic processes to speed up the creation of insights? And then thirdly, most importantly, you have to look at your people. You have to look at easing the upskilling of people. The other term that I really like is the general data citizen, or we refer to as a citizen data scientist. Those people are interacting with that data. How are you upskilling them? How are you making them more comfortable with data and analytics and machine learning and AI? When we talk about AI, it requires a strong foundation. You have to understand the goals and risks and capabilities that your organization has in regards to your analytic maturity. And you need to be upfront and frank with that. You can do certain things well, or other areas, whether it's data quality, whether it's spreadsheet-based processes, where really are you in that analytic maturity cycle? And then you have to have the ability to incorporate human judgment and accountability into every AI process, right? You need to be able to delineate between the black box and clear box AI approaches. Obviously, we talked earlier, was talked about the principles of trustworthiness AI. That's key to this. You have to understand what your AI functions, your machine learning algorithms are actually doing with the data. How are they structured? And that requires you to maintain transparency and continual testing, especially with the ability to harness and drive insight with unstructured data. And key to all this is really the capability to mitigate undesired bias and ensure objectivity. Our CDO, Alan Jacobson, says, artificial intelligence doesn't make moral judgments. It's not inherently biased, but historical data and the creators of the model could be. And you have to make sure that you understand that. So when we look at, analytic process automation, which is what Alteryx does, we look at how we automate the assets of inputs. And I know there's a lot of discussion about your data can be in different styles and different formats and different applications. We enable the automation of that. And allow our users to deploy automation building blocks across the entire analytic lifecycle. Everything from data prep and profiling to data blending to diagnostic reporting to higher levels of analytics around predictive and prescriptive analytics to geospatial analytics to predictive auto ML and explainable AI. All done in a code-free or code-friendly fashion, and allow you to publish the insights, to share those insights to a variety of visualization and visualization and reporting platforms. And it's really, critical that it's all what's about this. That's a unified platform. And really, what we're helping organizations to do is, automate the data. Automate how they get access and democratize that data, creating speeds to insight, and allowing them to engage in augmented decisions, upskilling your existing data workforce, and then being able to deploy those insights, whether it's out to the edge or out to a report, to your executives. And that's what analytic process automation is all about. So when we look at automation, and really there's a lot of talk about AI, but really automation is what we're all working towards, is looking at how we do operational automation and automate data wrangling and automated data prep and blending. And then automating the descriptive analytics, automating the KPI reporting, understanding what happens. I love that story about the gentleman who was spending 3 hours a day trying to scrape stuff off of a website, where you can automate that process and reduce those number of hours taken to create that insight. To then more strategic automation, looking at diagnostic and spatial analytics, automating, what did it happen, when did it happen, and where did it happen? Being able to do that all in a unified platform. And then predictive and prescriptive analytics, what will happen, and scenario modeling, trying out different, different scenarios, trying to figure out what the outcomes might be, and allowing your users, or those with the domain expertise, I think was mentioned earlier, really to engage with the data and model those out. They know what could possibly happen. Let's allow the analytic process to help us determine what might happen. And then finally, looking at creating that capability for cross-line of business transformation, being able to do that in a no-code or low-code data science capability, because not everybody's going to know how to code. I think somebody said 1% of the population is a classically trained data scientist. It means most of our data workers don't have a formal background in data science, but we want to be able to upskill them and leverage their domain expertise. And finally, by being able to do that, then we can create intelligent auto modeling and machine learning to really help us achieve our mission outcomes. And this is what automated analytic processes is all about, or what we call analytic process automation through the Alteryx platform. I just want to briefly just go through a story, so where has this been done? Atkins is a partner of ours that they work extensively with FEMA when the hurricane struck Puerto Rico back a few years ago. Obviously terrible devastation. It was vital that obviously recovery resources would be fed out on the ground. The building and damage inspection needed to be done quickly, but how do you, with a catastrophe at that scale, how do you do that quickly? What Atkins was able to do utilizing Alteryx is they built up a capability to look at all the building stock data, the weather data, where the impacts were. They were able to automate the prep and blend of all those different data sources, from weather, building stock, construction type to geolocation, and then analyze that data to identify the risk and forecast, where the greatest damage paths were, and they could focus on getting the recovery out. What they did was they built a predictive analytic model in Alteryx to automate that insight and get that information out to the inspectors, so they could focus where they needed. They could focus their efforts and get the recovery flowing as quickly as possible. I know I'm pretty much out of time. I will mention, if you want to learn more about Alteryx, what we're doing in the AI space and the machine learning space, I urge you to join our Inspire conference next week. Will.i.am will be talking about, speaking on the ethics of AI. He has an interesting perspective on that, as well as a number of other great speakers and sessions. So Alteryx, Alteryx.com/inspire, you can register there. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. You got Will.i.am on there. That's really cool. Awesome. Up next, we will be hearing from Nick Sacchi. Nick is the Principal Technology Strategist over at Pure Storage. Nick, over to you. We'll just give Nick 1 second. There we go.
I have the opportunity to talk today about using artificial intelligence in federal government agencies to improve agency support.
Uh-oh, we lost Nick. We'll just give him 1 more minute to get back up.
Operations. We've seen a tremendous uptake in adoption of artificial intelligence technologies, and certainly a tremendous interest across the federal government as a whole. In the Department of Defense in particular, we've seen the establishment of commands of agencies specifically focused on developing and deploying artificial intelligence. We've seen it implemented across the entire spectrum of the federal government, and broadly also across a lot of the state and local governments as well. But we've gotten past a lot of the initial level setting questions around, an AI strategy and a data strategy, and all of these things are really fundamental to enabling the implementation and the effective implementation of artificial intelligence in government organizations, just truly like the adoption of any advanced technology. We've also seen that it is no longer theoretical, that it's actually a practical and real capability that agencies can leverage in order to support their efforts, whether it's, obviously, taxpayers and revenue, or Department of Defense operations, intelligence community, et cetera. But there are still a lot of significant challenges ahead of a lot of agencies as these efforts come out of the laboratory or out of the pilot and proof of concept stage and into a production or deployment type of environment. So what we see is there's a lot of questions or challenges around what type of technology to implement, how you implement it at scale, what types of applications are suitable for implementing an artificial intelligence or implementing artificial intelligence and machine learning at scale. People, the availability of people, where do you get the expertise? What skill sets need to be developed in the workforce or brought into the workforce and able to get the most out of an agency's artificial intelligence efforts? And I think I really want to sort of take these things in that kind of a track. First and foremost, you've got to identify what it is you want to do or what you hope to accomplish with an AI strategy. And at the outset, a lot of this has been tackling repetitive, large-scale data operations, if you will. So the federal government generates data in quantities, volume, variety, and velocity that many people don't really fully appreciate. But a lot of this data, for example, camera imagery is agonizing. It takes a tremendous amount of time for an individual to look through streams and streams and streams of video, but it is actually a task that, as an example, computers are really good at. So just doing machine learning, or computer vision, I should say, in machine learning, to start identifying relevant contextual information in video streams or massive collections of still frame imagery has become a very popular use case. And we've been pretty successful in helping agencies leverage that for everything from cancer research to intelligence and battlefield surveillance. But getting a sense of what is in the art of the possible is also, I've seen federal agencies do a tremendous job working with industry and academia to tackle these kinds of challenges, because while the specific outcome of a given AI application may be particularly specific to that agency, the computer technology underneath it is actually rather broadly available and broadly utilized. So everything from the algorithms to the actual hardware themselves are often portable. So you can, the government's done a good job of identifying best practices and most successful implementations in companies like Page AI and Facebook and others, and bringing that expertise or those application skill sets in-house to apply to the government's problems. This also sort of at the outset underscored something, that the initial pilot efforts may have been built off of like a single GPU platform, or fairly robust but pre-existing legacy architecture, and that sort of introduced another challenge. The infrastructures of yesterday were really designed to do much more generalized types of computing at a much smaller scale in terms of overall parallelization, the breadth and number of processes that were simultaneously trying to process data was very different in the classic database and server virtualization type of architecture. But in artificial intelligence, the need for massive parallelization has really driven everybody towards a technology baseline that focuses on distributed and parallelized compute, largely using things like GPUs and tensor processing units and things of that nature, because you have so many different processes working simultaneously, answering segments of the problem in parallel. Well, that poses a tremendous strain on legacy infrastructure. So companies like mine have been not forced, but really moved to develop a technology baseline, a framework that is built for artificial intelligence type applications. And we've seen the popularity of that emerge, particularly as large organization and government AI efforts have started to expand beyond the laboratory or the testing phase and into the real training, development, and production phase. So we're seeing tremendous increase in the requirements for bandwidth, a huge increase in the amount of compute required, and really you start seeing these large-scale disaggregated architectures where compute, networking, and storage are managed as separate components to facilitate the easy and rapid scaling of the technology infrastructure to support the actual work. And then when we start taking a look at skill sets as well, we've seen the rise of a really different kind of specialist, the data scientist, and the rise in a different kind of infrastructure engineer and administrator. They're two different kinds of things. A data scientist is really figuring out not only how to ask the questions, but what can the data tell them, and then how to get the answers out of these vast data sets. And on the infrastructure side, obviously, when you start talking about managing your on-premises architecture as if it were a large-scale cloud, it's a different way of thinking about the architecture itself. It literally is that as a service type of capability where you've got networking, you've got compute, and you've got data service, and these things get managed but loosely coupled to each other via the applications and application programming interfaces. So it really becomes an almost loose coupling of technology components that get dynamically allocated as the application needs change. And with artificial intelligence, a lot of times that becomes self-servicing. So API-driven automation and API-driven infrastructure become integral to and fundamental to the success of AI platforms, especially as they start to get larger and larger. So, if you think about this in a sort of structural way, the first thing you do is develop an automation strategy. You have your data, you have a data management strategy, and you have a sense of the types of things you want to do with that data. So then you have to develop an automation strategy of processing that data, refining the data, and preparing that data for utilization in the AI framework. And you apply the people to tailoring the data operations and the infrastructure operations to support those outcomes. And eventually you have the core nucleus of technology and people necessary and process necessary to start actually applying the technology against the problem set for the desired mission or agency outcome. So does all that sort of make sense? There's a lot of broad strokes there. The short version is as well, some of the stuff is new. In truth, it's really a growth in the same types of technical capabilities and capacities that we've evolved over the last 60 years. It's just the scale is now much greater. The velocity of the data is much higher. And we're adapting, as we always do, to making the tools deliver the results that we would like to obtain from them.
That's great, Nick. If I can ask a real quick follow-up question,
Sure.
Where do you see the federal government over the next 1 or 2 buying seasons? Where are we going to see some near-term success?
I think we're going to see a couple of things. We're going to see in-house capability brought on board to start addressing the test and dev, or the pilot and proof of concept phases. And then a continuous iteration and continuous development, or CI/CD, software engineering and AI training mechanism that will very often probably be deployed into a shared infrastructure or a cloud type of environment. But I think we'll see the capability development happens in-house, and then the deployment into production will probably happen in large scale, either government-owned or contractor-owned cloud environments for deployment into the real world. So I think we're going to see a huge increase in cloud spending, particularly around artificial intelligence. And we're going to see a fairly large change in the consumption patterns for on-premises infrastructure as well, and the mandate to ensure that they work together.
Very important. That's all the time we have. Thank you, Nick, Principal Systems Engineer for Pure Storage, Nick Psaki. Thank you, Nick, and have a good rest of your day.
Yep, thanks, Nick. And we even had a special guest appearance, Tom Suter, CEO of ATARC. Up next, we will be doing our second panel of the day, which I have the pleasure of moderating. Just as a reminder, please put any questions that you have in the Q&A box. We will be answering those throughout the panel discussion. And additionally, don't forget to answer the poll questions, because that will ensure that you receive your CPE credits for being here today. So now I would like to introduce our panelists. If you could all come on camera and go ahead and unmute yourself, give a little wave to the camera when I call your name. I'm going to introduce first Robert Keisler, the data scientist and analytics engineering lead over at the US Navy. We also have Alan Hill, Acting Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Category Management at GSA. We also have Krista Kennard, the Branch Chief of Emerging Technologies at the Department of Labor. Next is Brett Vaughn, the Navy Chief for Artificial Intelligence at the Office of Naval Research. Next panelist is Nathan Manzotti, the Director for Data Analytics at GSA. And last but not least, we have Adelaide O'Brien, Research Director and Government Digital Transformation Services at IDC Government Insights. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. First, I would like to hear a little bit more from each panelist. Anything you'd like to share with the audience up front about what you're working on as it relates to the subject today that we will be discussing. So if I could first hear from Robert, please.
Sure, thank you for that. I am the lead here at one of our engineering commands for the Navy over a data science and AI group. I've been building this group for the past about 8 years. We started with our first couple hires in 2012 and now have over 150 data scientists and AI engineers that work under us, working on naval and DoD problems. And so just happy to be here and contribute to this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Adelaide next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adelaide O'Brien, and I'm a research director at IDC Government Insights. Now, IDC is a global analyst firm with over 1,000 analysts that go very deep in technology, and we also have analysts that cover vertical areas in my case, the federal government. So I help agencies with digital transformation. I go deep into AI, big data, cloud, machine learning. And I've recently published research based upon what our government clients tell us, and also survey data on how agencies can mitigate the potential for bias in their data, the importance of an adaptable enterprise-wide AI strategy, leveraging AI-enabled software for recruiting, as well as addressing some bias in the recruitment process, and also the importance of understanding not only the complexity of AI, but the roles and responsibilities of everyone in the agency. And I'm thrilled to be here today.
Thank you. Over to Brett next.
Thanks, Chris. Brett Vaughn. I'm the Navy Chief AI Officer, also the AI Portfolio Manager at the Office of Naval Research. My job is essentially to help the service attain a higher level of understanding of AI as a technology, as an enabling capability, and help the service set conditions so we can more effectively leverage it. That is across the entire service. My responsibilities extend across warfighting sectors, corporate sectors, and readiness sectors. And when I usually, on a panel like this, I like to set out by describing a little bit how we define and describe AI. We view AI holistically, not as a single technology, a constellation of many interrelated technologies across really 5 bands, from rule-based automation to intelligent automation, cognitive analytics, narrow AI, and general AI. We're interested in the whole landscape at a strategic level, and then at a more tactical level or single instance level. A very powerful and effective mental model that we incorporate is that of the AI stack. We use a derivation of the Carnegie Mellon AI stack, but simply put, to make sure we're focused on the right components of creating AI, the data, the compute, the transport, the models, the algorithms, all that in a coherent and resilient ecosystem. But happy to be here and looking forward to the engagement.
Thank you. Over to you, Nathan.
Hey, everyone. I'm a director at the Data Analytics Center of Excellence within Technology Transformation Services at GSA. What we do at the Centers of Excellence is we work with other federal agencies to help them advance with their digital transformations and modernization efforts. So it's really driven by the partner agency, what we actually do, and every engagement is different. But it's always along the lines of advancing, their capabilities to meet their mission goals. So yeah, happy to be part of the discussion.
Thank you. Krista, would love to hear from you next.
Hello, everyone. My name is Krista Kennard. I lead emerging technology for OCIO at the Department of Labor. I am new in this role, as it is a new portfolio here at the Department of Labor. And really, it stems from some of the work that I did when I worked actually with Nathan over at the Centers of Excellence. The Department of Labor has recognized that many of the new technologies in this space could really help drive the way that the various agencies that make up the Department of Labor are able to deliver on their mission. And so we wanted to create a safe and structured environment for the exploration and experimentation with these new tools to see how they can be leveraged to meet mission priorities, but also how we can be monitoring and evaluate them to ensure that they are doing what we intend them to do. And that is particularly relevant to the work that we're doing, both with robotics process automation and artificial intelligence. And so we want to create an environment in which we are able to explore, can a bot help optimize a business process, or will some sort of machine learning or AI capability be able to streamline an existing process or really solve for a business challenge? And the answer may be yes, the answer may be no, right? And the answer may be yes across all fronts, or the answer may be yes, technology can do this, but we really need to be thinking about our people and our processes, right? Or the answer may be no for any number of reasons, right? So we really want to be creating a space where we can be thinking critically about these technologies and ensuring their responsible implementation in our ecosystem.
Excellent, thank you. And over to you, Alan.
Thank you. I'm Alan Hill. I'm Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Category Management. I sit within Federal Acquisition Services at GSA Information Technology category. I'm the technical arm. My staff is the technical arm of acquisition. And it's very important when we're going out and getting AI services that we make sure what translates in technical requirements is also properly annotated within the contract that's need. I manage a $30 billion portfolio of IT spend, which emerging technologies and AI is an extremely important portion of that. We want to make sure that as agencies go out and begin exploring AI and begin leveraging it, that the contract vehicles that are being leveraged are lined up to their business needs and to get the exact services that they're intended to be. We make sure that through our reviews that when the agency comes to us, they're getting the right type of AI and making sure that the vendors are the right fit for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Let's pop up our first poll question of the day, which Alyssa is number 2 for you on your list. I'll go ahead and read it. In your opinion, how far along is your agency in accelerating AI adoption through the use of emerging technology? Alyssa, if you could please pop that poll question up for our audience and attendees to respond to. I'm not seeing it. Well, we'll move on. She'll pop up the question when she's able to. Robert, I have a question for you. I want to focus on AI emerging technologies for the first portion of this panel discussion. So what are you currently focused on at the Navy as it relates to AI emerging technologies? And what kind of challenges does this bring up?
Sure. So we focus on, as Brett talked about, we focus on the full spectrum of AI technologies. We have so many different needs across the spectrum, whether they're focused on our warfighting side or our business side. Every problem set that could be thought of, we face. Some of our challenges are just that broad problem set. You know, there's so many ways to solve these problems. You have to have a workforce that understands all of the different types of algorithms and the different types of approaches. But our biggest challenges really are getting folks to get beyond the magic of AI and understand really how AI can be applied to their problems or not. And really discussing that with our customers and our decision makers and our leaders, and making AI real, I think, is really the biggest challenge that we face today.
Thanks so much. I'm just gonna take a brief moment to remind everyone to please answer the poll question that just popped up. So you can answer if you are very far along in your journey or are in the process of adopting AI, have just started, have not started, or you do not know where to start. So just remember to respond to that if you want to receive your CPE credits for today. And Adelaide, along those same lines, what do you typically advise agencies on as it relates to AI emerging technologies? And how are other agencies utilizing these?
So, you know, that's a great question. And one of the surveys that we recently did was asking government agencies about what percentage of their AI projects failed. And, you know, agencies have been undertaking, even beyond pilots, RPAs and chatbots, but we see that a very high percentage fail. About 42% of respondents said that between 10 and 29% of their projects actually fail. So we asked the agencies, you know, what are the reasons for this? And the top 2 reasons are that first are unrealistic expectations. And that was selected by almost 35% of the agencies. And there, you know, reading into that and talking to our clients, it's, you know, it's piggybacking on what Robert just said, making AI real, right? What can it do? And oftentimes agencies have to change their processes in order to leverage AI. The other big reason is that the technology didn't perform as expected or promised. And so on that, it's very important that not only agencies, but the vendors who are helping the agencies really set, the expectations and not overpromise the capability of AI. Some other issues are the lack of data. We know, and previous panelists today have talked about, how much data government has, but it has to be usable data, right? It has to be labeled. Agencies have to know the lineage of the data. It has to be granular enough to use. And then, another area is the data prep area. And I know that's not glamorous, but we saw that same issue as agencies started to deploy big data. The data prep, making sure your data is clean and granular, that is a big issue, and that'll affect your AI system as well. And then finally, staff and talent. And it's not just data scientists, but it's data engineers, AI modelers, and these are top reasons that are holding agencies back from success.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Brett, could you please give some examples of how AI emerging technologies are being used to reduce toil, and what other benefits are they presenting at your agency?
Sure. So, again, looking at the broad landscape, starting with RPA, or rule-based automation, we're looking to lever the rudimentary tools, the automation tools, a lot in our corporate or back office environment, as well as at sea, but I'd say mostly today in our financial management sectors, and what people on the outside of the Navy would recognize it as a traditional business function. We have a very vibrant and active RPA community that's creating, developing, and deploying what I think is a good number of bots. Can we do more? Yeah, absolutely. So we're pressing that to make sure we're grabbing that low-hanging fruit, as well as the higher levels of more capable and sophisticated AI types, cognitive analytics and narrow AI. On that, we're looking at really two big buckets of capability, I'll say. We're interested in using those types of AI to fuel some level of autonomy in an unmanned system. The general public would think of these as drones or robots, or we call them unmanned aerial vehicles, unmanned surface vehicles, or unmanned underwater vehicles. And then the other case is decision aids. So algorithm or code to augment human decision-making, make it faster, more capable, and of a higher quality. And that could be that at sea, back in the office, or anywhere in between, really. So those are the three real big buckets of where we're focused on development and deployment of AI. Reducing toil, powering autonomy in unmanned systems, and increasing the speed and quality of human decision-making.
Thank you. And Nathan, in our prep call, you talked about maturity capability models. Could you please share with our audience a little bit more about this model you've created, and how can organizations use this framework along their own journey?
Sure, I think it's perfect time to do that, because really that builds off of what Brett and Adelaide were saying. So one of the things I had the privilege to work on at the Centers of Excellence is what we call the AI capability maturity model. And it has 7 different layers: people ops, cloud ops, DevOps, SecOps, data ops, machine learning ops, and AI ops. And then 5 levels of maturity from level 1 to level 5. And basically what it is a framework that, as agencies start to look at, pursuing advanced capabilities like machine learning and artificial intelligence, where do they fall on that spectrum of overall IT and data maturity? And what should they focus on? Because like Mr. McIsaac from Alteryx was saying at the beginning of his presentation, there's a whole set of capabilities that need to be in place before, really any organization can do AI effectively. That's going to depend on the application that it's used for, right? To build an autonomous drone, that requires a completely different set of processes than it does to build confident, accurate decision support algorithms, right? So really, it's one of those things that agencies, you know, instead of just prototyping something, they need to look at their modernization journey overall and see, you know, what they're capable of doing today and what's the next step they should take to invest smartly, use their man hours smartly, and get towards those capabilities that they want to achieve without wasting any time and money and being effective.
Thank you. And Krista, now that you're at DOL, what are some use cases at DOL that you are looking at as it relates to AI emerging technologies? And can you please share some examples with us?
Sure, I'm happy to talk about some of the things that we've been working on here at DOL. So a project that we've had in the works for a while, it's gone through some of the open challenges, is actually with related to what the Department of Labor does with helping transitioning veterans to find work that is suitable to match their skills as they transition out of the military, specifically looking at finding apprenticeships that match their skill sets. There's actually been a number of challenges associated with that to see how can we be leveraging machine learning and artificial intelligence to be helping out in that situation, right? And I mean, I think this isn't a solved problem yet. I think Adelaide touched on this, right? Agencies are looking at how we can be leveraging some of these technologies for matching people to job capabilities. And one of the things that we are really very cognizant of at the Department of Labor is we want to ensure that we are protecting workers' rights and equitable distribution of any kind of recommender system, right? We certainly don't want to be imposing any existing biases or introducing new biases to how we help veterans find work, or really anyone of our labor force find work. So we're still very much in the process of figuring out how could we use a tool like this, but make sure that we are able to monitor and evaluate it in a responsible way. We also have made a lot of progress in the robotics process automation front. We have about 6 different bots in production, which I know doesn't sound like a lot. I know that a lot of agencies like DoD will boast of their bot armies of hundreds of bots, which is very exciting and certainly a place that we'd love to go. But considering we had 0 bots last year, I think that's a huge progress for where the Department of Labor is at. And they're in the space of procurement. And we've also got a couple that are helping with, to Brett's point, some of our back-end processes as it relates to human resources and just some basic data processing, which is, I think, really exciting. And so, again, I've been in this role for a short time, but really what my goal is to take these from, all right, we built a bot to do this, or we built a machine learning model to do this, to really thinking about this at as an enterprise capability, right? Because one of the things that we see across the organization is, well, maybe you want to use natural language processing to be evaluating forms or evaluating claims. There are many agencies, not only at the Department of Labor, but across government, who do that very same function, right? So making sure that we're not only leveraging best practices, but really creating pieces that are reusable and reachable by a wide audience. And I think that that's really how we're thinking strategically about how this technology can really enable our organization, but also making it accessible to a wider audience, right? To not just solve niche problems, but really solve agency-wide problems.
Awesome, thank you. And Alan, since your focus is on adoption of AI and aligning to needs, what are some things that agencies should be focusing on as they begin adopting AI technologies and best practices at their agency? And also, how can they best be prepared for that?
Thank you. So I would say, AI, I think the panel here all could say that it's really an emergent technology, particularly in government. There is much work that's necessary to be done to bring and normalize it and bring it to scale. For us, GSA, particularly in where I work, the information technology category, our goal is to strengthen AI means streamlining the acquisition in which they get it through our IT contracts. We're looking at ways to align the acquisition vehicles more seamlessly where the business needs of the agencies and the capabilities of the technology. We also want to bring the small and disadvantaged business to the forefront for the federal procurement opportunities. A lot of these AI developments come through small businesses, i.e. Polaris and STARS programs come to mind, and where our focus is on bringing some of these emerging type capabilities to the forefront. So goal is to enable agencies to make the best use of AI. Many are in the learning stage, as you can hear. I'm sure Nathan can probably talk to that because his team really focuses on helping agencies get to where they need to be. And we partner a lot with TTS to help agencies. So when they're not ready to use the vehicle, we turn to TTS to help move them along to where they are ready to leverage AI. New commercial RPA, machine learning, AI products are coming to market every day. We're learning more and more about them. We're adopting our vehicles to be able to have those technologies available. Bringing it to scale, you have to account for all the factors though. The efficiency, cost, security, governance, compliance and the dependency, the lifecycle modernization. Every piece is critical to long-term success. Our contracts are aimed to normalize the acquisition of the emerging technologies with the mix of vendors that come across our array of vehicles. We have the Alliant 2, VETS 2, STARS, Polaris, all as examples. Thank you.
Thank you. So next I have a series of questions surrounding the strengthening of AI, but before we continue, I just want to make sure, do our panelists have any other thoughts around AI emerging technologies before we continue on? All right, I guess we're good then. So Robert, I had a question. If you could please tell our audience a little bit about your agency's literacy campaign. What is it and how is this helping to strengthen AI within agencies?
Sure. One of the gaps, I talked about earlier was making AI real for our customers and decision makers and others. And one of those things that we found was really just establishing a literacy baseline for our for everyone on what AI is and demystifying it. And so we've worked with partner groups to bring in external training. We've developed some of our own training programs to be able to provide to folks. And we're continuing to campaign to try to make AI something that people understand and that they can bring into the way that they work, because we do believe that in the future, AI will be a critical component of pretty much everything that we do, because we see that even today, I mean, people don't realize how much AI is actually impacting them day to day. I mean, AI is impacting the algorithms behind so many things that we interact on a day-to-day basis. Trying to, demystify that and just show that to them so that they understand it and can speak smartly and rightly with those technical folks to build what they need.
Awesome. Thank you for explaining that to us. And Adelaide, in your opinion, what is the most important thing agencies should be focusing on in order to strengthen their AI? Who all should be included in these conversations, and are there any ethical concerns to consider?
Oh my goodness. So if I had to pick one most important thing, there's many important things, but let me pick one. And that's the importance of an adaptable enterprise-wide strategy. So we're going to start with that. And, similar to Nathan's maturity model, I'm going to share with you some results, again, from a federal government survey of how they're doing on that. And I'm going to start with the least mature first. So about 20% of respondents say they're currently piloting or experimenting with AI, which is great. It's a good start. Another 28% have a few uncoordinated AI initiatives. And then another 28% said that, AI is a priority for our agency, but we're really only aligned with one or two line of business folks. So that's about 75%. And what we've seen over time is that these agencies are really going to be challenged to move beyond their RPAs and kind of the silos of innovation around AI, and it's going to be difficult for them to scale and operationalize throughout the agency. So the remainder 25% actually have a better chance. And again, comparing to Nathan's maturity model, these are the more mature agencies. So about 11% said, AI is a priority, and they've executed projects aligned with multiple line of business folks. So now they're starting to leverage. And as they start their use case, they're looking for other parts of the organization, other line of business folks who have similar needs, right? About 5% say they have an enterprise-wide AI strategy, and they're rolling out very coordinated programs and projects. And then the most mature, and that's about 9% of the agencies, say that not only they have the AI strategy, it's enterprise-wide, they're working with multiple line of business, but their projects are repeatable. So that's where we're suggesting that agencies really start thinking about making that repeatable. Now, as your panelists have already talked about, and Robert's just mentioned, in order to be repeatable, people have to know what AI is, they have to know how it affects their job. But if I were to pick one thing, it's really to start with that enterprise-wide strategy, mission, and alignment across the organization.
Awesome, thank you. Speaking of which, our next poll, Alyssa, if you could please pop that up. It should be, does your agency have an adaptable enterprise-wide AI strategy in place? And you can answer yes, no, or I don't know. And moving on to Brett, what, in your opinion, is the importance of an underpinning digital fabric when it comes to the strengthening of AI? What are your thoughts around the democratization of tools in order to provide broad access?
Yeah, so my characterization of the importance of that digital fabric is that it's an absolute predicate for effective AI development and adoption. That won't happen without it. So it's critical, it's crucial. A lot of people fly over it, but I think some of my panelists have mentioned it, as well as in the previous panel. They did a good job of hammering that point home. If your data is not in the right form, if it's not accessible to all the pieces of the enterprise that need access to the AI tools, your AI will struggle to be highly effective. It will never scale. So digital is absolutely critical. And then the democratization of the compute, the data, and the tools as well. Super important for, again, getting to scale. On the last panel, someone used the phrase citizen data scientist. I love that phrase. That's about cultivating not only AI experts, but just ordinary folks, for us sailors and Marines, that will work with operators or users to develop AI applications. But it needs to be widespread, and it needs to be, as Adelaide said, enterprise-wide, right? That's a lot of what Rob does down at in his element for the Navy. He's at the fore of a group that's focused on recruiting and sustaining a healthy pipeline of folks coming into the Navy with critical AI skill sets, and he's doing a great job of grooming them. But yeah, digital, absolutely critical and a predicate for effective AI, and the democratization of those data, compute, and tools will help those citizen data scientists to not only get traction, but then make it repeatable, like Adelaide said, and ultimately scale.
Great, thank you. And Nathan, what are your thoughts on cross-functional teams and innovative lab software when it comes to strengthening AI? What other tools can be used to strengthen AI?
I think those things are extremely important, building on what Brett just said. Having the capability to, jump into an environment that's built for innovation and test new ideas quickly with all the key people around the process in the room at arm's length of one another is really what, allows innovation to happen without major roadblocks in the way. So You know, you need those cross-functional teams that you have domain experts, you have IT personnel that understand the security constraints of the operating environment, you know, your data scientists that understand the science behind everything, and they can communicate and understand what each other will need to move the ball forward. And then they need to be able to test ideas in, you know, software environments that allow them to do so quickly. So containerization platforms, for instance, is a type of software that allows you to quickly spin up new technologies and use them and test them. But, you know, without the people component, that technology by itself is essentially useless, right? So other capabilities, like Adelaide was touching on the big data wave some years ago. You know, a lot of these big data platforms that agencies have access to now have the capability to set up data lab capabilities within the software itself. So giving access to the citizen data scientist within the multiple parallel processing, you know, the really fast engine that they purchased, giving them a space where they can work safely without breaking production workloads and test new ideas can go a long way. Because someone who's maybe not on that data science team formally might build something when they have a little time one afternoon that they solve a problem for another part of the organization. So I think there's a lot of power in just building the foundation to foster innovation.
Absolutely. And Krista, what do you believe people should recognize when it comes to strengthening AI within an agency or organization? And how can agencies best coordinate across the whole domain?
Yeah, so I actually want to make a call out here to human-centered design. Right, I frequently go to panels like this or speaking events or conferences, and people are always talking about the technology is only a piece of it, right? We got to get the people upskilled. We got to get the people understanding this. We got to demystify AI and these technologies, which is 100% true. But I think as technologists, we have a responsibility to make our technology more accessible, right? And so I'll give you an example. When we started on this robotics process automation journey, we wanted to engage with our procurement specialists who are going to be using these bots. And we talked with them around what their experience is, what their current process is. And we designed a bot that we thought would meet their needs. Sure, the bot absolutely did what it was supposed to do, but the way that our end users interacted with it was very confusing. And we actually ended up seeing pretty low utilization of the bots, not because it didn't provide value, but because users who are not technologists, right, who are very smart and capable procurement professionals couldn't interact with these bots because technologists, we didn't design it in a way that was accessible by people who didn't think about technology in the same way that we do. And that actually prompted us to change direction. And we actually just launched our Bot Center, which is this very nice, slick user interface that we really built with end users in mind so that we don't have to our users don't have to jump through hoops to try to access these bots, right? It's very interactive, it's clickable, it tells you what you need to do to be able to interact with this bot. And in just the 3 weeks that it's been up, we've seen over a 30% increase in utilization of these bots by our user base, just because they were more accessible. We did nothing to actually change the functionality. We did everything to change how you interact with it, right? And I know that's harder for more advanced technologies like artificial intelligence. And it does require some understanding of how models work, how decisions are being made, right? But I think when we insist on iterative human-centered design, we get to success faster. And in that way, not only are we producing new products, right, but we are educating people and upskilling people in the process, right? So it's this, what I think human-centered design really empowers is learn by doing, right? On both sides, right? The folks who are not technologists who have to consume this technology learn more about technology, and the technologies who build this technology and understand it very deeply learn more about users to make it more accessible to them.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Alan, how would you leverage AI to focus on the agency mission? What are some examples, and do you have any use cases in mind?
You know, I do.
Go ahead.
Adelaide or Alan? I'm sorry.
Alan. Oh, I actually called on Alan. Is there anything that you would like to interject though?
I just wanted to piggyback on what Krista just said about human-centered design. And one of the things, in addition to helping the users of the technology, one of the areas that we think is really important is creating personas before you design and start training the AI, the machine learning. So in the model phase, it's really important to start thinking about who are the citizens that you're going to impact by the decisions you're making. And then in the testing model, test for those personas. What is the outcome? Are we actually enabling, say, the veterans who are, suicidal, that type of thing? And what's interesting about that is if you use that in the training and the testing, in one way, it'll help you then, not only understand you have bias in the system, but make sure you're not doing any harm to the personas that you've identified. And as well as now, this has become so very important, it'll also help agencies address the equity in delivering benefits, because you can look for personas in underserved communities and make sure then as you roll out your services, your information, your benefits, you're testing it against not only the outcomes, but all of the personas you created, and make sure that you're actually enforcing your mission that way. So thanks for bringing up the human-centered design, Krista. I think it's excellent.
Absolutely, thank you.
Kristen, I like to redirect the question, because this is extremely important for agencies and the vendor community. And this is the readiness for adoption of AI. And I've been an engineer for decades, a long time. And I've seen where agencies see the shiny object, run to it, and try to adopt it when they're not ready. And it's important that they do a readiness assessment, some of what they did with the cloud, application readiness rationalizations. Is it ready to go to the cloud or not? Because sometimes trying to adopt something before you're ready could be a disaster. I can't remember which panelist was talking about it, but they were talking about how failed, I think it was Adeline, that was talking about failed AI efforts. AI has the potential to really supercharge many of the business practice and revolutionize how we deliver services in the American public. There's a huge spend increase where, National Security Commission of Artificial Intelligence made a recommendation that by 2026, AI funding for federal agencies, non-defense, should be at least $32 billion a year. A lot of money being thrown at it, right? The total AI spending has rose 360% between FY17 to FY19. That's a big increase. It reflects federal government's intent to incorporate AI technologies throughout all these agencies' missions. But to get there, we'll need to really rationalize and modernize their IT infrastructure, what they have in their portfolio. Cloud and particularly a modern network infrastructure is fundamental to adopting AI. It's very important for agencies to make sure they understand their data is accessible and know where they're at, right? Without that data and not knowing where it's at, you can't leverage AI. CSPs can easily scale computing power across a wide range, okay? So the cloud providers are there, they're able to scale easily. But if not already, agencies really need to modernize their network infrastructure and make sure it's elastic and scalable to the business demand that we found essential during the pandemic, right? Us being able to scale, we had some agencies that could, others that weren't ready. Similar, and many panelists have already talked about the importance of computing power, right? And being able to do that. So is your infrastructure, the security and everything goes along with it. They need to really consider leveraging AI as a service. One of the challenges agencies continue to deal with is lifecycle management, that modernization of their infrastructure. And using it as a service allows them for that technology in the back end, using AI, but leverage that technology on the back end to be modernized without them having to do that. Government does not do a good job of keeping modernized infrastructure. And so by moving to the as a service model helps that move that along. So I think that's extremely important for any agency. And I will tell you, when I came to GSA, if I had known all the tools that GSA had when I was at my previous agency, I would have saved my team a lot of headaches. And I can tell you, Nathan's team has a group of geniuses in AI that can really help facilitate. Save yourself a headache and go leverage them to help with that journey. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Alan. And Ken Munson, who's with OPM, wants me to announce that if anyone is interested in human-centered design, OPM has allowed a lab that provides HCD training and real-world exercises, and he left his email address. So I guess he's okay with you guys emailing him. On that note, we are running up against time. So I want to do around each of the panelists, share what your thoughts on the future of AI are, anything, your vision, or things that we should be aware of as we encounter this, and any final closing remarks that you want to leave our audience with. So let's start with Robert, please.
Sure. The future of AI, I think that we really need to focus on is how automation is going to impact everything that we do. It's going to impact our workforces. It's going to impact how we interact with the public, how we interact with our systems. And I think it kind of goes to the point that Krista brought up, that human-centered design piece, really understanding how the human and the machine interact. And I think that's going to be a key piece of the future of how we approach AI.
Thanks, Robert. And Adelaide.
So every year we publish our top 10 predictions, and one of our predictions for U.S. federal agencies is we're predicting that by 2025, 65% of agencies will protect the security and privacy of their digital assets, and that's wherever they reside, whether in the office or remotely. And they're going to use AI to contain, identify, measure, and address security risk. And this is based on the fact that some of the security threats are happening so fast, and they're faster than a human could make the decision, right? And prevent the attacks. And the other thing that we're seeing is that traditional antivirus methods, they rely on blacklisting, right? And this is threats that they've seen in the viruses. But, the AI systems can start to think about and look at software and suspect it's malicious, without the need to rely on a predefined list. So this is an area that we think agencies really should, start to explore, start to invest in. It is very nascent. And as agencies start to deploy this, they really have to monitor, the AI system and make sure that as it makes decisions, they're aligned with the decisions they are making. For example, if the AI stopped all traffic, including normal network traffic, because it's suspected, malware in the system, someone needs to be on top of that and maybe override it. But it's an area that we think agencies are going to continue to invest in, and it's very appropriate to stop the bad actors from doing very bad things.
Thanks, Adelaide. Over to you, Brett.
Okay, I want to end up with something Alan mentioned. He mentioned the National Commission on AI and their final report, which it came out in March. And there's really two big signals coming out of that document: urgency and innovation. On the urgency end, they have recommended to the President and Congress that DoD be AI enabled by 2025. That translates to the Navy, of course, directly. So I'm working our adaptable enterprise-wide AI strategy to that target as we speak. But that's a lot shorter clock than we thought we were going to have to work with in previous years. So time to move fast. On the innovation side, I want to just say that the future of AI is now, right? And we as a service, we weren't born digital. We have to shift to digital, and that will require a lot of innovation. There's a quote from the report: "Warfighters cannot change the way they fight without also changing the way they think." And there's another one which really hits home for me. Rob mentioned he used the word campaign, and he's absolutely right. To meet that mark of 2025, this is a campaign of culture. For me, it's more about changing the way we're organized and the way we operate than it is about the technology. The technology is important, but I think the culture is the more important fulcrum here. And the other quote is, at every level, technologists, operators, and domain experts should function as integrated teams. And it's a different way of operating for us, where we have folks that have done that. We've seen great success. And the last point I'll make on that is piling on something Krista said, is field to learn. So we as a service in the Navy, been involved in AI for years, decades. A lot of our gold is in the lab. We are focused right now on moving as much of that into the field or the experimentation and prototyping, piloting environment, and then looking at how we improve the digital landscape to then scale that capability. But field to learn as much as possible. I think that can only accelerate and raise our chances of effective AI adoption.
Thank you, Brett. And Nathan, future and final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. I think everybody touched on a lot of important things, but I'll close with, AI is built on data, and I think the real success or failure of how we effectively implement AI and use it is going to be determined on all the processes around how we describe our data, prepare it, and then monitor these algorithms when they're in use based on what they're producing and the feedback loops that we build in to be able to make changes quickly based on the data, what the data shows.
Thanks, Nathan. And Krista, what would you like to leave our audience with?
Sure, I'll be quick, but I would say stop thinking of success as a binary. And by that, I mean, if you want to raise an area that says, I think AI might be able to solve my challenge, don't think success means full-scale AI solution in production, right? You may get halfway through and say, oh, you know what? We can't do AI. That does not mean that you failed. That means that you won because you learned something and you're going to be able to make better decisions in the future. So stop thinking of success as a binary and stop thinking of success as in production.
Love that. Thanks, Krista. And Alan, take us home.
Thank you. I'll say, one, be mindful of costs. Apply AI where human power is not feasible. I give you an example, cybersecurity. That's my background. And one of the things that as AI gets cheaper, we will experience more cyber attacks. AI controlled by controlled cyber attacks will need AI controlled defenses. Very important. Anchor AI in ethics. AI demands a higher bar for governance. We in government are responsible to make sure that AI systems are ethical, responsible, transparent, and explainable. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you again to IDC for partnering with us on this. And we had such amazing panelists and conversations. So thank you all who are at home joining us today. And we hope to see you next week at our Emerging Technologies Virtual Summit. So you can go register and we look forward to seeing you there. Everyone have a great rest of their week.
Bye. Thank you.